There is something quietly unsettling about the story of Jesus that almost no one notices. The most influential figure in human history, a man whose name reshaped empires, calendars, morality, and identity itself, is known almost entirely through texts written decades after his death, selected centuries later, and preserved by institutions that directly benefited from how his story was told. That doesn't automatically mean the story is false, but it should make you pause. Because when power survives and a message threatens it, power rarely erases the message. It edits it. It reframes it. It keeps the parts that don't challenge control and quietly removes the parts that do. And when you slow down and look beneath the familiar version, past the polished theology and repeated phrases, a very different figure begins to come into focus. Not a man who came to be worshipped, not a founder of a religion, but someone who challenged how people lived, how they treated life, what they consumed, and where they placed authority. This is where the story of Yeshua actually begins. Yeshua did not live in a Christian world. Christianity did not exist while he was alive. He lived under Roman occupation in a land where religion and politics were inseparable. The temple was not just a place of prayer. It was an economic system, a power structure, a gatekeeper of morality and access to God. Offerings meant money. Rules meant control. Hierarchy meant obedience. Most people assume Yeshua stood at the center of that system. Historically, he came from outside it. He was associated with communities often referred to as the Nazarenes and Essenes, groups that lived apart from cities and temples, away from official priesthoods and Roman oversight as much as possible. Their spirituality was not loud. It was disciplined, practical, daily. They believed purity was not something performed once a week. It was something lived every day, in what you ate, how you treated others, how you treated animals, how lightly you lived on the land. They rejected violence. They rejected animal sacrifice. They rejected priests who sold access to the divine. This was not rebellion. It was preservation. They were keeping something older alive. The Essenes and related groups lived simply. They grew their food. They ate fruits, grains, herbs, and vegetables. They avoided flesh. To them, food was not neutral. What entered the body shaped the nervous system. What shaped the nervous system shaped perception. What shaped perception shaped the soul. Eating was not just survival, it was agreement. They observed something most people never stop to notice. When a being dies in fear, that fear does not disappear. It shows up as tension, stress, noise in the body, violence dulls sensitivity, blood hardens perception, death carries weight. This wasn't moral theory, it was a lived observation. People who lived gently stayed clear. People who lived on blood hardened. This context explains why Yeshua taught the way he did. He did not teach domination. He did not teach conquest. He taught alignment. When he spoke of the kingdom, he did not point to buildings, borders, or institutions. He pointed inward. And this is the part that should make you uncomfortable. If Yeshua walked into many modern churches today, there is a real chance he would be labeled disruptive, dangerous, or even heretical. Not because he changed, but because the system did. A man who rejected sacrifice, questioned authority, and told people to look within does not fit neatly inside institutions built on obedience. That tension has always been there. Most people just never slowed down enough to feel it. In several early traditions, flesh consumption was not treated as harmless. It was understood as something that weighed the body down. The idea was simple. A body filled with death struggles to remain sensitive. A nervous system shaped by violence struggles to remain clear. A mind constantly managing fear cannot easily perceive truth. This is why some elders used to say, "I'll give you breadcrumbs, but you have to walk the path." Not everything was meant to be handed over fully formed. Understanding was earned through awareness. Now look at what many people wear around their necks. A symbol of execution. A device used to kill. Wooden nails. Pause there for a second. If someone you love was killed by hanging, would you wear a noose as jewelry? Probably not. Not because the person wasn't important, but because the tool of death wouldn't represent the life. So why did this symbol become sacred? It's an uncomfortable question. Not an accusation, just an observation. Execution devices were common. Crosses, gallows, stakes. They were warnings, messages of power. Yet somehow one of them became the center of worship. Over time, the focus shifted from what was taught to how it ended, from life to death. And when death becomes a symbol, something subtle happens in the psyche. Suffering becomes holy. Pain becomes necessary. Guilt becomes useful. That doesn't mean the story has no truth. Many people feel deep meaning in it, but meaning and interpretation are not the same thing. One can exist without the other being fixed. Early teachings often focused on alignment, how you lived, how you treated your body, how you treated others, not what you believed about a distant event. When the body is the temple, harming it makes no sense. When awareness is sacred, numbing it becomes a loss. But when worship moves outside, the body becomes secondary, something to endure, something to punish, something to ignore. That's when energy changes. Not mystical energy, human energy, attention, emotion, focus. When people are taught they are broken, they seek fixing. When they are taught they are incomplete, they seek completion. And structures form naturally around that need. Buildings, institutions, rules. Not because someone planned it, but because belief creates behavior and behavior creates systems. That's the part most people miss. It doesn't require villains. It only requires forgetting that awareness comes first, forgetting that the body listens, forgetting that meaning begins inside. Once that forgetting settles in, anything can be placed on top of it. Holidays aligned with stars, dates aligned with cycles, symbols layered with new stories, not necessarily to deceive, but to replace. And replacements are easier to manage than lived experience. If someone feels God in their breath, they don't need permission. If someone feels truth in their nervous system, they don't need fear. If someone knows the temple is alive, they don't need a building to feel worthy. That doesn't mean gatherings are wrong. It means purpose matters. Are you being reminded of your inner signal, or are you being trained to doubt it? That's the quiet line, the one rarely spoken out loud. As long as divinity lives somewhere else, power stays somewhere else too. But the moment someone realizes that awareness itself is sacred, everything shifts. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly. You start to notice what drains you. You start to notice what sharpens you. You start to notice how often guilt is used as glue. And then another question appears. If the original teaching was that the body is the temple, who benefits when people forget that? Not as a conspiracy, just as a consequence, because systems don't need intent to have outcomes. They only need repetition. So maybe the question isn't whether the stories are true or false. Maybe the question is simpler. Where did the focus move? From inside to outside, from living to believing, from awareness to obedience. And once you see that shift, it's hard to unsee, because then worship stops being about location and starts being about attention, what you give it to, what you take it from, and whether the temple you were born with has been silent or just ignored.